Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in on our very, very fun stream. Hopefully, y'all saw the chat and are very excited for our special guest today that is joining us for a wonderful second stream. If y'all haven't already, please make sure you check out the chat and check in for our event today. Remember that it is really important to check in for your stream so that you get the points and the swag that you deserve for putting the effort in and getting to all of these streams. So, without further ado, I'm Varshni. I'm an MLH coach, and I will be your moderator for today. But to introduce our actual streamer for today, everyone give a huge round of applause to Fred.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? Hopefully well. I'm sure you're doing a lot of awesome sections. Today, for my follow-up to my first one, and whether you caught it or not, this is basically just, we're going to look at a little more context into securing AI agents with Python and Auth0 and LangChain. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
So it helps to think about what we call the principle of least privilege, to kind of frame things going on. As we know, security is there to, protect our code, our users, and all of that. But, sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of times it doesn't work. The bad guys are very diligently. And so sometimes it's simply your code is going to get hacked. Your agents are going to get hacked. And so that brings us to the principle of least privilege. When that happens, basically, we want to be able to minimize our exposure. So instead of handing our AI agents all the creds that they need to be able to do whatever they want to do, ultimately, we want to start them up in a minimal state. And then only when they need to take some actions, then we want to basically temporarily step them up and give them just the privileges they need to really do the task. And so that's what's behind this privilege, this principle of least privilege. So here, this thing, we see basically an example of without the principle of least privilege, we see that someone coming in and making requests, they're able to basically do whatever they want to do with orders, do whatever they want to do with the user profile, and imagine this thing connecting to several other number of things. What we really want to do on the right side is that when an agent is being asked to retrieve some orders, they only need a scope down privilege. So instead of doing everything there, anything with the profile, anything with the orders, we just want to give them not just access to the orders, but just read access, right? And so that's kind of what we see here to kind of visualize that a little bit. And that's one thing. Okay, perfect. All right. Super. Let's move on. So the interesting thing with AI agents is really who is making a decision. If we're basically doing it ourselves, executing some code, do some database queries, whatever migrations we're doing, then yeah, it might be Fred up here. And if something goes wrong, Fred gets some emails, some alerts, phone calls, probably all at once to basically explain myself and resolve type thing. And if it's my code, it's a similar case. It's like, okay, Fred's broken. Fred's code is broken. Pipeline is busted. So let's again give him a ring and have him come and resolve this kind of thing. It's a different thing when we've got an AI agent because the decisions are or dynamic. So instead of having something static and deterministic, even if it takes into account various conditions, the agent is basically on the context, it's going to make that decision dynamically. And so, though I created the agent and gave it all kinds of instructions, that context is a moving target. Things are going to drift. And so, there's really no way to guarantee at the end of the day what that agent is going to do. And so, responsibility becomes a bit murky. So, it's kind of what I was getting into. Previously, you would have something on the left, which is basically here's the code. Even if it's complicated, it has a certain structure, and we can go in and have some idea and confidence in what it's doing and why it behaved in a certain condition and so forth. On the right side, though, we're thinking about what's going on in that black box of the agent um, and that context. And so we really don't have access into the structure. So it's much harder to reason about and ensure what you're asking the agent to do, is going to work out. What you're asking the agent to do might be totally fine. Maybe it's underdescribed and maybe it works in some cases. Maybe something bad happens in another case. So we don't want to just rely on, at the end of the day, what an agent is telling us. So OAuth in 2.0 specifically, and OCID, these give us means to basically add the extra layer of security. So you can't always guarantee that the agent is going to do what you want to do. But in the case that doesn't happen, you want to have some extra backup protection. So it, OAuth isn't just about authorization and identity. Basically, um, the access tokens are digital keys, and we were able to basically scope the specific permissions and actions that can be done. We're able to revoke them dynamically and basically limit our exposure. And that comes down to kind of defining granular scopes. You saw earlier where just having access to profiles and orders, or here just orders, is too broad. You want to be really constrained to what's happening. And so you want to be very specific. Maybe in this case, you need orders read and orders write, and not some other type of things like other deletes and other type of accesses. Um, so the scopes really help with the auditability and and if there's any kind of gap or mismatch to the agent you're talking about, um, you have the backup of having security in practice. So even if the agent tries to do something that's undesirable, you can potentially block it with proper security. And so there's some hygiene things we can follow for validating tokens and lifecycle best practices. Like if you imagine if the agent needs to do A and then you give it permissions to do A, then the agent needs to do B and you give permissions to do B. Well, if you're not managing it, then suddenly the agent now has permissions A, B, then it will get C, then it will get D, and then it will basically have all these capabilities that should it get attacked, the attacker will have, so much so many powers available to do horrible things. Whereas if you can kind of manage that scope to what the agent needs to be doing at a certain time, you can restrict that. So we want basically to give the agent short-lived access tokens that are tightly scoped to what it needs to be able to do. So here's a basic flow of least privilege for AI agents. You have a user initiating a call, maybe to say like read something from Gmail. So then that agent is going to go and check the policy in FGA to see if that user has access for this particular thing it's trying to do. Maybe Thomas wants to read his email, but maybe he wants to read my email. So we want to be able to scope it in and really make sure that each particular person has access to do what they need to do. And so based on that response that the agent gets back, that can gate whether ultimately they're able to go forward with that API call or, they have to basically block it. So we're going to focus on the code on the code level at a project we have. Yes, there we go. So have a look at that. I'm going to be jumping over here, and we're going to look at our sample called Assistant Zero. That's an AI personal assistant that lets you do things with Gmail, lets you do things with Calendar, and shows you can kind of how you can use these tools securely. So I'm gonna try to let's see, move myself from here. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, dump my slides for a sec, and now share my screen. Okay, at the stage now. Oh wait, not there. Oh, there we go. All right, sorry about that. Okay, we'll just do window maybe. Tab. Okay, we'll just do entire screen. All right, sorry about that. Should have run through this before. Let's cancel that.
It's all good, no worries. You can try adding it to the stage, and then I can just manually put it in.
Okay.
So if you just click.
There we go. I think that should do it. So I want to add my PyCharm here.
Yeah, if you just click share screen, it'll pop up at the bottom, and then I'll be able to add it to the stage. So you just click that plus button, click share screen, click whatever window you want, and then click share, and then it'll show up at the bottom, and I'll be able to add it.
Yeah, it's not showing my PyCharm window. Let me go here. Maybe I have to add it.
When you're trying to share it, like on Chrome, it's not letting you see it?
Yeah, because it's my, you know what? I'll just open it up in, I'll just open it up in the GitHub window. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. Use that link you gave here.
In the meantime, y'all should check out the GitHub link and familiarize yourself with what it looks like. There's a really detailed README that y'all can go through and investigate. So check that out while we're figuring out the screen share.
Okay. Improvise. So can we see my screen now?
I can. Perfect.
Okay,
There we
wonderful.
go. Good
All
to
right. Okay, so we showed kind of an overall flow. We can jump into some of the code. So let's start with Auth PY. Okay, this is a good place to start. Yeah, so how we go about doing that. Auth0 has a bunch of different frameworks that it integrates with. For our purposes, we're going to be looking at integrations with Fast API and LangChain. So here, in getting started, I'm going to basically use the auth client and the Auth0 config so that we can basically have everything together centralized and then basically expose it as a route, as you see with the third import. So here I've got my Auth0 config, and I'm going to pull these values from the Auth0 dashboard. And I won't try to switch to the Auth0 dashboard right now. And then basically fill out the basic things and pass this to the auth client. And then once we have an auth client, we're going to basically register the routes that we need, which will be mounted. So I think I will. So here we're now, yeah, using those things. So we're going to basically, since we're going to be accessing calendar, we've got some a call to Auth0 AI, which is again, which is one of the libraries, and we're going to say with Token Vault. So Token Vault is, I talked about how we don't want to give the agents permissions, all the permissions. We don't give them the credentials. We want to basically give them short-lived tokens to do what they need to do. So in how we do that is that we'll use the Auth0 AI library, and we'll say with Token Vault. So Token Vault is what actually manages those credentials. It manages all the refresh stuff and a lot of the other kind of Auth0 management things that you might not want to deal with. So it'll take care of all of that, and basically just make sure the agent has the permissions that it should have at a certain moment. So here we're using the Google OAuth2 connection, and we're basically granting access to calendar events. And so if the agent tries to do anything not supported with that scope with your calendar, you're protected. It's not going to be able to. So even though someone might talk it into doing something, you've got the protection there. And similarly, we're going to do something for async authorization. So what this is about is that maybe your agent's working on a long-running task, or maybe something sensitive came up in its approach. Even if you're sitting there and talking to your agent and it needs to do something, if there's anything that requires some additional privileges, then we need a way to be able to uh, let you know and get your permission. So what this is about is that it uses something called, in the OAuth 2 world, client initiated back channel. And so that lets the agent basically ping your phone for the logged in authenticated user, and basically give you a confirmation screen and an approval screen, basically. So it shows you what it's trying to do, and if you give it permission to proceed, then it can proceed. Otherwise, it doesn't get the permissions, and even if it tries, it won't be able to do that action. So this is very important. And so here we are calling the Auth0 AI module with wait async authorization, and we're giving it the audience. So the audience is basically um, is how we scope to particular AI APIs, and then users should have access to it or not. Here's the scopes. So here it's like letting you retrieve information using OpenID, and it's giving you permissions to call the endpoint that requires product by privileges. So then here you can see about how we give context to the user to basically give them an explanation. So we're being very clear and intentional to the user. And so it's like the message is basically saying, do you want to buy some quantity of this product? And then that way the user will basically see what they're in for and decide whether to agree or not. Okay, so I'm going to jump back now that we have this nailed out, and I'm going to unshare this. There we go. And now I'm going to restore my presentation. Okay. All right. And let's see. I should click present, I guess. Okay, there we go. All right. So where were we? Yes. Okay, yeah, so we just jumped in the project and looked at a little bit of code here. So here's a high-level flow for securing AI tool usage. Okay, we did that one. Yes, and we looked at that code. Okay, so also, the example is using the Python module, the SQL module, and Postgres is being used underlying. So that can be used with the FGA to basically perform these lookups about who has access to what. So you can basically imagine a kind of graph of relationships, right? Where you'll see people like a certain person, and then there's a relationship like, okay, certain person is a member of this, certain person is able to do this, all those different type of entitlements, as we call them. So when you go and you make a request, it will actually traverse the graph um, and see if a particular person has a route, has a path from that action they want to do and who they are. So here we see kind of a post to access docs here, connect to the database, open a session, and then we're trying to, take some kind of action, right? And so once we're trying to do that, um, we're going to pass the query to determine whether or not someone has those privileges, and we're going to basically push back the results. So this is just to make sure whoever's seeking access, has permissions to do that. Okay, let's jumping back. Bear with me. Okay, it'll be much faster now that I have an idea what I'm doing. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. All right. Okay. So we were taking a peek at the SQL model, and we simply create the engine and set it up here, and that is going to take us to FGA. So, yes, I should have done this. So, we can develop certain models. So I was talking about relations and types like user, types like doc. So here's an example schema where it's a very simple example here, but it's basically showing how we define who can do what. So in our world, an owner can be a type of user. Viewers can be a user or a whole group of users. And then here's a permission whether someone can view something, and they have to be an owner or user, and then have a link to the resource. So this is using something called fine-grained authorization, and there's a well-known Python library for that called OpenFGA for fine-grained authorization. So that's what we're using here, open source. Like that. So here we're pulling in the OpenFGA client, and we're going to basically build up that client. So you have a basically a kind of backend for your service running. So we're going to pass it the API URL. We're going to pass it the path to the database, the credentials that are needed to be able to access it, and then when users are making different requests, the agent can basically, for the resource, check whether or not that particular person is entitled by basically traversing that graph and seeing that there is a permissive um, pathway there. So yeah, we have our client, and we put in the model that we discussed, and then that's how we set the FGA up like that. Okay, jump back to here, the StreamYard. Okay, now I'm going to go back with impunity to my slides. Okay. So once again, okay, yes, the RAG flow. So this is where we traditionally see things like FGA be used. It can actually be used in a more wider way, but this is basically the reason that it was written is basically for particular documents or even parts of documents, parts of databases, who should have access to what. it's a way to basically, once instead of just querying for the relevant context and then hoping that the user should be entitled to use it, um, it basically filters those results to make sure that the person has access to something. So even if the call to the vector database has things like I shouldn't see, um, because I don't have access to that, those will get stripped out, and the agent won't be able to return me data that I'm not allowed to see. So in this example, we see the user um, calling to upload a document, and then it's going to, do the check, and yeah, fonts are a little low here. And so in this case, you'll create basically dynamic relationship tuples that are added. So now that I've added a document and I've said, now I'm listed as the owner to that document, it creates the proper relations. And then if I later go and decide to share it to a particular person, basically the graph will be uploaded to have those people or a set of people, or make it public. And so all of those things are basically being handled here. So the embeddings will return more, can return more than someone is allowed to see. But when we basically then check the fine grained permissions, those things will be filtered out and will be safe. So that's how a RAG flow might look when we're seeing FGA. And yeah, we can skip that one. So yes, exactly. I did notice at the last moment that my font size was too small, even for me looking at it. And so, but not quite enough time to change it. So I apologize for that. Yeah, so basically, this flow is showing, the user interacting with the API. Um, then that's going to result in a RAG call, and then they're going to check with the database to see, to pull the related documents, and then it's going to go to FGA for kind of filtering and evaluation. Okay, so that's the end of the slides. We'll jump back into the code and look at some more examples. Okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so we looked at, again, back in the Auth0 Assistant project for using Python and LangChain for Assistant 0. We looked at some of the core APIs there. We can jump and look at some of the routes might be helpful. So we were just talking about documents. So let's jump in here and take a look. So here we see that we have an endpoint called get documents, and we're going to basically associate that with the auth session, and then our access rules documents without content, which is basically to get some kind of metadata. So we'll pull basically for the documents certain metadata that we want, file name, file type, created at, those type of things. And we'll make sure that the current user owns that document, and then we'll return that there. We talked about uploading a little bit. So we're using the FastAPI upload file that you guys are already familiar with. And once we get past the basics and we do extractions and kind of pull the bytes that we want to read to retrieve it and wrap it in a session, and generate the embedding. So again, someone has uploaded a document, it's PDF, and so what we've done is we're basically going to read it in, we're going to chunk it, and then we're going to create embedding so that when the agent is being asked questions, we're going to do the similarity search and bring back the relevant chunks. And so this is where you can easily get context that doesn't belong to you or that you shouldn't have. And so in this way, this document that I shouldn't see basically is going to be gated out by FGA. So here we're basically now, as I said, dynamically, when we add new things, we're going to basically add relationships. So here we're adding a relation to associate the user with a particular document, and that's how the owner relationship gets managed. Now we're looking at an endpoint to retrieve content, and that's straightforward. Nothing much to talk about there. But share, we get to talk about the relations that we added. So when you're sharing a document, we retrieve basically the list of people something is already shared with. So for this document ID, we find out, okay, who already has access to it. Then based on the ones that we want to provide access to in the shared document request, we're going to basically add them to the set so that we can filter out any duplicates. And now we're going to basically update this document with a new list of people that can be given access to it. I noticed in this example that if you want to revoke access, like prevent me from looking at it, you won't get it from this method. But we can do it here. So this is deleting a document. So here we'll basically also remove the users attached to it, and then we will remove the document. Okay. In the chat routes where we actually talk to the agents, interesting. So this actually, yeah, there's nothing really. The access token and refresh tokens you see getting passed in here. Won't be being given to the agent, so that's fine. We'll jump now to agents, and yeah, this is actually where I was planning to jump. So we talked about some different tools, and again, these tools are just basically Python functions. We'll look at them in a moment. Some of the different ones here: get user info, list upcoming events, shop online, get context docs. But you guys are already familiar with this pattern, I'm sure, where we basically create an agent using the React design pattern for RAG for agent use. But here you'll see that it's basically looks the same, and that's kind of the nice thing about the integration. You can do things as you would normally, and these other protections like what Auth0 is doing behind the scenes and the FGA and all that kind of stuff comes inside as we look at different tools. So let's start with Google Calendar because that's a quite simple one. Yeah, so here's one of the first tools that we saw, list upcoming events. So here it's going to grab an access token from Token Vault. And see, the great thing here is that you haven't shared your credentials with the agent, right? This tool isn't going to get your creds, isn't going to be able to do all kinds of things that could be done with your account. Instead, it's getting a finely scoped token, and so it's getting its version of a Google Access token that has minimized permissions to basically just do what the user is basically granting access to. And even if we think about the default privileges that a user grants access to, the user knows, because before the tool can be added, actually, the user has to approve when signing up and clicking that, okay, yes, you can use this tool and do things with the tools. And then if additional permissions are needed, they would just get another screen to kind of enhance, and basically we call this step up authorization, where they add some additional permissions. And the important thing that you want to do for these actions, as I was alluding to before, is that you don't want to just add to the permissions over time, and basically the agent becomes all powerful with those things, but you want to be able to revoke the permissions once they're not needed anymore. TTLs help like that, the time to live. That's one way to manage it. There are some different ways, and another thing you can do is when the next request is done and it's a lateral movement, you basically revoke those permissions that you gave before, and then you give the new set. And that's how you keep going back to the original baseline and get new permissions related to the particular task that you need to do. So here we're listing the upcoming events and for the calendar. And now we're going to basically retrieve them here. And these will, you can't see it here, but these will actually get filtered out if there's something that you shouldn't have. But again, this is coming from your calendar and using those permissions, so it's not going to return anything that you can't see. User info. So the get user info tool. Here we just basically allow very simple info about the user, things like name, so they can say, oh, how are you, what's your email address, and just some basic level things that you basically give consent to when you get your auth scene, your authorization screen. So context documents, this is where we're talking about the RAG and the FGA. So we're gonna basically pull from the user info their email, and then we're gonna connect to the vector store. And so your FGA retriever basically checks that you basically have access to the documents that you're asking for. So here we're providing this scope in the graph. Remember, I told you the graph where you have an identity that says like, okay, user : then the user's email. Now, even if the user doesn't have direct access to the relation that's gating the permission, as long as there's a path from there to the permission, it will basically return that as a result. So you can be very granular, and then everything is kind of managed based on the graph properties so that you get what you're looking for. So we retrieve documents, and those are already scoped, and so you won't basically have documents that you shouldn't see. And lastly, shop online tool. So for this tool, we're getting the credentials, and a lot of the things that, and a good thing to keep in mind is that mostly the code doesn't change a ton for the different tools. So that's a huge help with the frameworks and everything you want to be able to support. So this is basically shows the data that can be used, that can be, it tells you what you're trying to do. So you'll tell them the product, you'll tell them the quantity, and then they'll accept. We're kind of basically faking it mostly by just basically, um, we're not connecting Stripe here or doing the next mile, but we basically just want to be able to show that when a user wants to take an action and it involves some kind of online shopping thing, that we communicate based on the query. You're talking to the agent, you have the stuff, it pulls out all the important context like the product and the quantity, pops a message on your phone, and you're basically able to approve whether or not that should continue. So that's just basically gives a high level example of how that might be managed. So Varsini, I think I've ended a wee bit early. I'm open for questions if there are any. Let me get out of here. Yeah.
Sounds great. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to ask Fred anything about Auth0, any content from this stream, anything on the GitHub, anything about Fred's work at Auth0, any questions at all. But great stream, Fred. We really enjoyed hopping back and forth between the GitHub and PyCharm and seeing a lot of different examples. So that was very fun. Yes, this stream is saved as a video. It's saved in MLH's live. So I'll send the link for that. It's in Major League Hacking's live streams. All of the videos are streamed and saved like that. So let me get that link up for you. But yeah, anything that you're interested in watching, as long as you go to the lives tab, it will be there. So there you go. That's the link for there, and Fred's video is actually number 1 there because it's being live recorded right now. Looks like we have a question for you, Fred.
Yes. Perfect. So fine-grained authorization. Historically, we've done this type of thing with roles, right? And so you would just say, okay, if Fred is a member of accounting, then he should have access to these resources that accounting has. This is very kind of coarse. And then you have to say, oh, okay, and then if they're a manager and all these different things. But there's lots of other facets like, is Fred logging in from an unknown IP address? Is he logging in outside of office hours? Is he on vacation now and he's trying to access? Is it a different location? So you have really all of these different facets, and a lot of them can be kind of dynamic. And so you, just like we have the principle of least privilege, it really goes into authorization, where because you have all kinds of malware and all kinds of attacks, you just want to expose and elevate for an attacker the minimal amount of privileges at a certain time. And so that's the main idea. Like if you log into your computer as root and someone comes and hacks you at that point, then they've got root access. But if you didn't do that, except for only when you need it, then they wouldn't be able to do all the different kind of things that they would do. If we look at some of the hacks, like with Supabase and kind of downloading information you shouldn't see, those things can be mitigated by having really precise permissions, around certain things. So, graphs visually and conceptually and for code are, it's a very nice way to basically model problems. As they say in computer science, you can basically use a graph for anything. And so that's the idea here, is that we don't assume what your model will be, how complex your particular use case is. You're entitled to basically upload a schema, and it will use types and specific entities and basically the full range of relations to figure out whether or not you should have access. I'll add one more example that might help. Normally, I might have access to see certain information, but if it's a certain event, like maybe it's a blackout period or other type of things, then in those cases, then okay, I wouldn't be allowed to see what I would normally see. And so you wouldn't want kind of static uh, course descriptions like roles to be able to do that. It would be too painful. So I hope this answers your question.
Definitely sounded like it answered the question. If anyone has any more questions, please put them in. We'll probably wait around for a couple more minutes, but we might log off early if anyone doesn't have any questions. So,
And if you're curious about Auth0 for AI agents, you can see them at auth0.com/AI.
it looks like you answered their questions. That's great.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I think we can end early then if there are no questions. If y'all have any questions, make sure you send them in the Discord and we'll get them answered for you. But if y'all want to go ahead and fill out the feedback form, that would be great. We always ask y'all for feedback to make sure that we can make these GHW streams the best that they can be for you. So here is the link to the feedback form. Oh, you're getting lots of thank yous, Fred. Thurva says thank you. Learner Long Life says thank you so
There
much.
should be some hate message for the small fonts. I'm gonna send one too. I'm gonna put one in too.
No, 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 no. And once y'all fill out that feedback form, check out the schedule for the rest of the streams today. Our next stream is actually not for a little while, but it's coming up in about 4 hours. It is the How to Use ngrok stream. So if any of you have heard of ngrok and you want to learn more about it, definitely check out those links in chat. So there's the schedule and there's the link for the rest of the ngrok stream. So if no one has any other questions, I think we're good to go.
So
Any
lastly, if you do have or a question occurs to you, you can find me on LinkedIn at Thought Poet. So THOUGHT Poet, and be happy to answer your question. Thanks a lot.
yeah, thank you so much, y'all.
Thanks,
Have a
person.
great day.
Bye bye.